Amenities and activities are provided from delicious, calorie-free, all-you-can-eat buffets to bowling alleys and comedy clubs. Excuse me.
Whoa, you okay there?
Yeah, I caught my own epiglottis.
You sucked in one of those Westworld flies?
No, my epiglottis is like hanging super low for some reason.
Wait.
A purgatory. What's that?
Is that the hanging down thing?
The
uvula.
The uvula. What's the epiglottis?
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass.
Welcome back to Chat the Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we loved when we were growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you know what Blockbuster Video is? If you answered yes, and this is the podcast for you, I am one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me are my co-hosts, Ash the Bomb Shelter Miller.
Hi, y'all.
And Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And each week we take a look back in time and decide if our favorite films still hold up. The movies we cover are chosen by you, the listeners, who generously commission the films you love. If you'd like to see all the movies we have covered, will cover, or want to choose one for yourself, please visit shatpod.com and have a look. At the end of each podcast, we will provide you, the audience, with a number of wipes each movie takes to get off your respective butts. So thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. That's how we help the podcast grow. Additionally, subscribe to our sister podcast, Shat on TV. We review TV series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, True Detective, Lovecraft Country, and Watchmen. Find all the information and past episodes at shatpod.com/TV. And finally, to hang out with us live, follow and subscribe to our Twitch channel, shatpod.com/Twitch, where we play video games, host watch parties, and edit this podcast live. All that being said, Big D, what movie are we reviewing today?
So, Gene, I know we say it a lot of times, but it's very true. This podcast exists because of our listeners. Without the wonderful community we've built and the wonderful community of supporters, we could not do this and wouldn't be able to. So it's really important to us to shout out when we get some of our really mega supporters. And this week is one of those, which is Jody G. And Jody has commissioned countless films. And that's why we were very, very excited this week when Jody G wanted us to go to a new place, The Afterlife. And he wanted us to review the 1991 romantic comedy, Defending Your Life.
Well, you wrote in and said, so my wife, Soleil, was never a huge listener of the podcast, or any podcast for that matter, but I was able to get her to listen to some of her favorite movies. Heathers, Clueless, Don't Tell Mom, The Babysitter's Dead. She thought it was funny. But why do they have to make their rating system about shit, she'd say. But she never really started listening. She did, however, roll her eyes every time I would start talking excitedly about the latest episode. I'd remembered this quirky little movie I saw and liked as a teenager in the early 90s. I introduced Soleil to Defending Your Life about 2 years ago because she mentioned that she loves movies about possible afterlife scenarios. She liked it, but wasn't gaga. Unfortunately, Soleil died in a car accident in January of this year, so this movie took on a new meaning for me. It's an anchor point in my memory due to the irony of the subject matter. In the months that followed, I had a consistent source of joy and an opportunity to escape into my childhood every Tuesday. It is not an understatement that you goofball movie nerds helped me through what was and continues to be the toughest period of my life. Thank you for doing what you do. I was really surprised at the Rotten Tomatoes score for this movie because while I always enjoyed it, I didn't consider it great or very well known. That is what drove it to the top of my list for commissions this time around. I found myself smiling throughout, but never laughing. I also found myself questioning my own daily courage. Whether the afterlife exists or not, could or should I be living my life better? Probably. I thought the cast, dialogue, and concept were really good. The cinematography felt dated, but the message didn't. Hope you guys and gal enjoy it. My wipe score, 1.25.
Well, thanks, Jody, so much for commissioning this film. I know getting the podcast out consistently is a huge deal to me because I'm a podcast fan myself. I listen to them every week. And that sort of consistency during hard times is so important. Looking forward to that thing you know you're going to get every Tuesday or every Monday or every Friday. Same with sports leagues, right? It's like that sort of routine can really bring you a lot of comfort. And I'm glad we could do that for you.
Yeah, and I want to thank you for writing and supporting us. And your wife, when you said she wasn't a big fan of the podcast, it sounds like my wife. So thank you again very much for the commission. And I'm glad that we could play a small part in trying to help you move on. And I felt bad, like reading this. I was like, how can we still shit on a movie potentially that has this heartfelt of a meaning to someone? So we have to be true to ourselves. I mean, you've come to expect it from us, right, Gene? We can't go soft on a movie because of this, could we?
Yeah, Jody, we're going to fuck your movie up here. Defending Your Life is a 1991 romantic comedy about a man who finds himself on trial in the afterlife, where proceedings examine his lifelong fears to determine whether he'll be reincarnated on Earth. Written, directed, and starring Albert Brooks, the film also stars Meryl Streep, Rip Torn, Lee Grant, and Buck Henry. Despite comedic overtones, the film also contains elements of drama and allegory. The film received mostly positive reviews from critics and holds a 97% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, based on 36 reviews. The film was not a box office success, grossing about $16 million in the United States. It did receive 3 Saturn Award nominations for Best Actress, Best Fantasy Film, and Best Writing. So Big D, Ash, we always ask where you were when you first saw a film and what your memories are of it. We'll start with you, Big D. What are your memories of Defending Your Life?
So, Gene, this movie came out during my illustrious time as a customer service representative at the Largemont Blockbuster. And even though this seemed like a popular film, it was not a blockbuster, because the way you judged the movie was how much of that little section on the wall you would get. If you were a true blockbuster, you'd get the entire wall. This was one shelf. So it was maybe like 8 to 10 copies. And I never saw it, but I did remember the cover box, the poster, but not at any moment in my entire life did I ever consider picking this up and taking it home with one of my free rentals. It had no interest in me. It didn't, and it's partially, I think, because in 91, I was still young. You felt invincible. Why would I want to see a movie about the afterlife? Only when you get a little bit older do movies like this really appeal to you, when you start considering your own mortality.
Yeah, this movie was not made for the kids of the 90s. It was made for their parents, right? Growing up, my best friend David's mom, Lola, she was the stereotypical white woman in her 30s. She liked to wear silk gowns. She would drink Chardonnay. She enjoyed Triscuit crackers and Hamburger Helper and dating guys named Gary. This is a movie for her generation. I never understood this world. I never cared for the movies it produced. And so this was the first time for me.
As a woman in her 30s, I take offense to all those things. I don't like Triscuit crackers. I hate white wine. And I don't own any silk gowns.
Yeah, but this is 30 years later. I'm talking about a woman in her 30s in 91.
Fair. I mean, Hamburger Helper still is amazing.
It's the bomb.
I've never seen this. In fact, I don't know if I'd ever heard of it until it was commissioned. And I was looking up what movie I needed to watch this week. I had a huge issue the entire time because I just heard Nemo's dad. Because that's my biggest interaction with Albert Brooks, is him playing Nemo's dad and Finding Nemo. But here's the thing. There's been a lot of movies like this that have come out since 1991, where people like vie for their right to come back to Earth for a second chance. You have really shitty ones like the one where Chris Rock winds up in a white dude. And my favorite afterlife movie is not any of those. It is easily What Dreams May Come. I love that movie. It makes me cry. It makes me think. And as far as the afterlife goes, my favorite depiction of heaven comes from the last episode of Angels in America, where he climbs that flaming ladder and then everybody's dressed like they're in Seattle in the early 90s. And I think it's awesome. But this movie had neither of those things. But I do appreciate the chance anytime we get to gather to talk about our own mortality. And I think it should make for some interesting conversation tonight.
And I probably won't be able to sleep. Let's hit the trailer.
With a click, with a shock, funnel to the door may knock. Under the light, something's coming.
From the beginning of motion picture history, Hollywood has tried to show you what the afterlife is really like.
Good afternoon and welcome to Judgment City.
You have any idea what's going on?
No?
Well, in a nutshell, you're here to defend your life, and I'm going to help you.
Defend my life?
Finally,
Wow!
the first true story of what happens after you die.
Where am I? Is this heaven?
No, it isn't heaven.
Is it hell?
Actually, there is no hell. Although I hear Los Angeles is getting pretty close.
Didn't anyone ever tell you you carry yourself very stiffly?
Leave me alone, I'm dead.
That's life.
Albert Brooks,
You make me think of my little poodle.
It may seem.
Meryl Streep,
I think I might have been a heavyset man at one time.
Rick Torn, Lee Grant, Buck Henry, in a new film by Albert Brooks.
So I'm on trial for being afraid.
Well, first of all, I don't like to call it a trial. Second of all, yes.
If you see one movie before you die,
I love you.
I love you.
This is damn exciting stuff.
see Defending Your Life.
Most people love it. Some it makes nauseous. Don't worry about it.
Advertising executive Daniel Miller dies in a car accident and is sent to Judgment City. Amenities and activities are provided from delicious, calorie-free, all-you-can-eat buffets to bowling alleys and comedy clubs. A purgatory-like waiting area is staffed by all-knowing and efficient but largely condescending bureaucracy who mostly seem to look down on the new arrivals, who will have their lives on Earth judged over a week-long hearing, each before two judges. So from the beginning of this movie, we're on Earth. This is before the afterlife, and I was very worried. It had LA Story vibes with Albert Brooks delivering an office speech that sounded more like a stand-up routine, and there's convertible BMWs and Barbara Streisand sing-alongs, all the things that are hilarious if you live in Hollywood and hang out with other actors and comedians. By the time Daniel died in that bus crash, I was cheering for his death because I hated this world.
No, but I don't think he's that bad of a guy. From what we've learned about Hollywood, he's an angel by standard, but he's a little whiny. He's insecure. I felt like it was like Larry David or Jerry Seinfeld. That was this character, except in an unfunny version. But I don't think he's that bad of a guy.
Yeah, Larry David is one of the most charismatic, charming people I've ever seen on television, and Seinfeld is brilliant. But I did get Seinfeld vibes here, just like Seinfeld, like ripoff vibes, right? Like it wasn't quite anywhere near as funny as Jerry Seinfeld is. But I do agree with you. Daniel's pretty awful. For me, he's that boss that we've all had that thinks he's hilarious.
Yes.
And so because we work for him, we all are forced to laugh at his jokes. We're forced to gather around like a shitty HEB birthday cake every year, and we have to act like we care about him. And I had that for years when I worked at another place. This guy who just, you know, he's the boss that brings like fancy mustard as like the contribution to like the Secret Santa because he thinks that everyone else should buy the nicer gifts. And that's a true story, something that actually happened. And it just made me cringe, like from the opening. And I thought because of the opening, we were supposed to hate him. Like I thought he was going to be an antagonist. And I was so confused once he got that white, you know, costume on that he was the protagonist that we were all supposed to fall in love with. It was very confusing for me based off of the opening.
I was bothered, though, by the fact that he keeps telling people a lie, that he was hit by a bus. He clearly hit the bus. It was his fault. He's trying to shed blame on this poor bus driver when he had nothing to do with it.
The way he tells the story, you'd think he was crossing the street or something.
Right. Yeah.
Not, I was in my convertible fiddling around with CDs or whatever the fuck, and then looked up and there was a bus. I mean, I'm not saying he's at fault. I mean, he is at fault, but maybe I hit a bus is too hard to explain. Then you got to tell the whole story. I was hit by a bus makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, and Ash, since you like Seinfeld, I'll do, what's the deal with the food? Why does everything have to have such calories? This movie wastes so much goddamn time beating us over the head with this food. What, Gene?
Why do you sound like a drunk Seinfeld?
That's what I was about to say.
I told you. What's the
Jerry
deal?
Seinfeld and Tim Roth had a baby together.
He sounds like the really like wasted heckler in the audience that's like heckling Jerry Seinfeld and doesn't realize he's the butt of the joke.
And if you guys, you can't see Big D, but he's like goosenecking over there. Like his head's swinging around wildly. His giant head on his little neck.
I told you, what's the deal? Okay. But they spend so much goddamn time. Oh, I don't want to curse.
What?
I don't like this. I don't want to say GP.
When did we decide we were going to curse?
Yeah. No, just GP.
Clutch my pearls. I'll make it to the afterlife if you say goddamn.
doesn't want to tarnish Jody's
I'm trying to
memorial
get closer to
podcast.
the Lord in case I ever have to, go up and defend my life. But this movie spends so much time like focused on the food. They can get calorie-free buffets. Everything tastes so wonderful. They keep beating us over the head. We got in Groundhog Day, where he can eat carefree. They do the joke once. Here, it is every single scene. Everything they do is revolving around food. And I imagine, because this is a Hollywood movie made for Hollywood people, and they spend most of their day probably worried about their physical appearance. But I found it sad that the one human vice that this movie thinks they would enjoy the most in the afterlife would be a meal without guilt. Where's the sex? Where's the drugs? Because if food tastes great, I'm willing to bet that every single line of blow is like it's uncut. Every orgasm is explosive. Wouldn't you want to taste more than just the buffet?
Yeah, I mean, as a New Orleanian, I just kept going like, this is what New Orleans is, and like this plane, like you eat whatever the fuck you want, you don't feel guilty about it, and the blow is uncut in most places, and every orgasm except on Bourbon Street is kind of nice. But I don't know. I think there's clearly a Judgment City after dark area, that's got like sex clubs and 8 balls and being sniffed off dicks and all that kind of stuff. But I, for one, am really glad that they skipped that entire part of Judgment City, because I don't want to see Albert Brooks in any sex situation, in any sex club ever. I would much rather watch him eating a turkey or eating a sushi than him having sex with someone.
Having been to Salt Lake City, I can tell you this is probably just LDS heaven. So they don't have any of that shit, right? And if you know Mormons, those motherfuckers love to eat and they love their desserts. And so it makes perfect sense here. I just don't understand their food choices. Ash, you talked about New Orleans. You go there and that's delicious food. It's rich food. You got your gumbos, your jambalayas, you got your etouffee. They're going with chicken with veggies, turkey, or a shrimp platter. Where's the tacos, the cheeseburgers, the pizza, the craft beer? That's what I'd be down for.
Well, it wasn't just chicken with veggies. It was chicken with veggies with like the lamest, whitest, like cocktail party pasta salad and then a potato salad on the left. Like, it's like the whole joke that like white people, and I am white, so I understand this. I'm part of this problem too. But like Thanksgiving, we all just have like brown foods, right? Like, that's what this plate looked like. It was so sad. Well, and the other issue I have here is not just the food choices, but also for me, like one of the worst ideas of an afterlife is that it's just another rat race, like this particular plane of existence, like that we all work to live. And I remember when I was a kid, my grandmother, who was very, very religious, who we just lost, she would describe what heaven was like for me. And it would start wonderful. It was beautiful with streets that were golden and paved with rubies and diamonds, and everyone has mansions if you were a good person. And I did not grow up in anything near a mansion. So I was like, whoa, that sounds great, right? Like, I was down for this afterlife. And then she's like, and don't worry, when you get there, you'll be assigned a job that you'll do in heaven for all eternity. And I was like, what? Because I didn't get it. Like, I don't want to have to work in the afterlife. I don't want to have to worry about money in the afterlife. I want bliss. I want peace. I want fun. And this movie hits on only a tiny like fraction of that, with like the fun and the calorie-free meals like you're talking about. That's the fun part. But this afterlife also has like really shitty TV and really shitty game shows, and it fucking has lawyers still. This is not fun for me. This sounds like hell for me.
I mean, this is the pitch we give our relatives to bring them over from Iran. We're like, it's beautiful. It's golden streets paved with rubies and diamonds, and you'll have a job driving a cab.
And Ash, it's nice to know that heaven is also segregated. Who's not living in the mansions? Who's doing the shitty job? Who's cleaning the toilets in the mansion? It's not grandma. I know she's not doing it. Maybe there's some darker angels flying around doing that. But I think heaven is not a one-size-fits-all. You can't please everybody. So God, if you're up there, you should make heaven like Westworld. There could be different parks to choose from. You can go do what you want to do. And then you're actually rewarding people for living a good life.
I think once again, this is a generational thing, Ash. Like your grandmother, my mom would be pissed if heaven didn't have jobs. Like growing up, I always heard that work gives life purpose, and you'll see if you don't have to work, you just won't know what to do with yourself, and you won't be happy. You won't be truly happy. I totally disagree. I'd be happy fiddle farting for the rest of my life if everything else in the world were taken care of. Now, there's a caveat there, right? If there was shit that needed to be done and it wasn't being done, I can't sit there and watch it not happen. But if everything was taken care of, fuck yeah, I'm going to sit around.
Yeah, like I'm going to be going to like the spa.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be getting like my seaweed wraps and my shea butter wraps and all that kind of stuff. And then heading out to go read a book somewhere in a meadow filled with fairies. Like, I want like beautiful afterlife. I don't want to work anymore. I'm only 39 and I'm ready to retire.
No, I mean, they can make sushi in like 32 seconds. You order it, it's done. You're telling me the grass can't be cut, the laundry can't be clean. Why do you still need to be having people do those jobs? Unless God is trying to punish people even in heaven.
Did they imply in this movie at any point there was a God?
No. It was the universe and it was a machine.
Okay, so what should I call? Okay, I'll just say the divine entity in this film.
Alanis Morissette.
Or I'm just talking about God now in general. Because God now in general, we're talking about what your grandmother and your mother believe. So we're outside the movie.
Right. It's like the Alcoholics Anonymous approach, right? Like, like the higher power is whatever you want it to be, Big D. You call it God if you want to.
Okay.
Well, Daniel's defense attorney, Bob Diamond, explains that people from Earth use so little of their brains that they spend most of their lives functioning based on their fears. If the court determines that Daniel has conquered his fears, he'll be sent on to the next phase of existence, where he'll be able to use more of his brain and thus be able to experience more of what the universe has to offer. Otherwise, his soul will be reincarnated on Earth to live another life in another attempt at moving past his fears. At Daniel's tribunal, Diamond and prosecutor Lena Foster use footage from select days in Daniel's life to make their case to the judges.
I know that this is a silly film, but I couldn't help but sitting there watching it, think about this whole idea that this movie is like super Kafka-esque, right? And so if you're not familiar with Franz Kafka, he wrote a lot about bureaucracy and how shitty bureaucracy was, because he's writing at like the start of the Industrial Revolution, where bureaucracy is really being created for the first time. And there's so much bureaucracy with like no real understanding or like why or from where the bureaucracy in this movie stems. I felt like you, Big D, in Mortal Kombat, and I'm sitting here going, okay, like, who decides how to decide these things? What legal system do they use? Why is any of it necessary? Because who decides the rules? And why just 9 days from their life? That feels weird. And why would you have someone defend the recently departed? Why not just make a fucking decision for him? Because it's not like he has any say in it. And so it all makes no sense. And it seems like this cue that like we just wait in for absolutely no reason.
And this part of the movie makes sense. Life is nonsense, so why would the afterlife be any different? I did enjoy that part of it. And actually, I felt it was a strength that they didn't explain a lot of it, because it did, as you say, Ash, reflect that Kafka-esque take. It is because it is, right? And that's what makes it so enjoyable. The smartest thing that Albert Brooks did in this movie was cast Rip Torn as Bob Diamond. Every time he opened his mouth or even made an expression, I was smiling. Like you said, Jody, not laughing, smiling. He definitely understood the role that he was given. Be jocular and somewhat aloof, but warm and professional. When they're in scenes together, Albert Brooks is just better. Starting with that first phone call he has with Daniel, setting up the rules of Judgment City and informing this clueless man who just died and found himself in a strange hotel of how everything was going to go, and help the audience understand what was going on as well.
I couldn't agree more. There's this one scene, if you haven't seen the movie, that I think is completely indicative of what you're talking about, Gene, which is when he starts to describe the food he eats. So they're sitting there and Albert has his chicken with veggies and various pasta salads and things around it. And Rip Torn, his character, has like this kind of gross looking brown thing with more brown things. And so Albert eats it and it tastes like shit. And he goes on and describes, Rip Torn describes how the food he eats changes as the more evolved that he gets. And he's so funny in this scene that isn't funny on its face. Like, he's just so kind of ridiculous in a way that he makes this bureaucracy make sense whenever he's on screen. And I loved every single scene that he was in.
I came into this movie expecting that Daniel was going to be defending his whole life, how he treated others, the decisions he'd made, the flaws he had, his shortcomings. But the movie, and I'm talking about the producers, for some reason, they chose to focus just on judging his worth by fear. I think it's unimaginative. It's uninspired. The idea of giving over their most regretful and embarrassing moments would be comedic gold. If you got people to show them at their biggest flaw, their most embarrassing, the bad decisions they've made. Instead, we get like 2 hours of Daniel basically being indecisive and insecure. And how is one case of stage fright? That's going to be the big gotcha, the big moment in the trial that's going to determine the fact of whether or not he ascends to the next level. I wish that we were maybe shown some real shitbags just breathing through the selection process because they never acted with fear. They were confident. The system is flawed, and I think the movie producers and everyone affiliated missed the opportunity to really delve into some other options.
Well, and there's this part that I think is really sad, which they kind of try to explain away with the scene with Meryl Streep later. But like, what about the relationships we make in our lives? Like, do we ever get to see the people we loved in our reality again? And granted, I know I am biased here because I just lost, as I've shared previously, the first person that I've ever been like really close to. This is the first real death I've had to deal with. And so I know I'm viewing this through the lens of someone that has just lost someone really dear to them. But it made me really sad to think that my grandmother would be in some Albert Brooks type heaven, like not thinking about ever seeing us again or not ever being able to see us again. That, you know, family or friends like just aren't a part of the equation of this afterlife at all.
But as Jody's defender, I feel like I should step in here and say, isn't that the point, that it's supposed to be an absurd trial, right? And so they're just focusing on this one dumb thing, which is, were you afraid or not, as opposed to all the things you guys mentioned, which I would argue are a much bigger measure of who you were on Earth and how evolved you became and whether you learned the lessons of life.
Well, yeah, and I have to say that as absurd as it is, there is something really terrifying about having to relive your greatest fears and see like how you just like utterly failed people and yourself as a result of them. And I'm not talking about like I'm really terrified of wasps and flying roaches. Like I have an actual phobia of the latter, where like I've passed out before, but it's not that fear that I would see. I can tell you 100% what it would be. I don't know if either of you know yours, but me, I have a crippling fear of abandonment. I have a horrible abandonment complex that came from my family teaching me about the rapture at 3 fucking years old. And it has defined so much of my life. And I have made some shitty fucking decisions because of this abandonment complex that I have. And so having to watch that played out in the afterlife, like having to see relationships that I didn't end because I was too afraid to end them, or having to see people that I hurt and rejected because I didn't want to get into a situation like that, it would be awful. Or like to see how I pass it along to my kids, because I'm sure I am in lots of different ways. Like, I don't want to watch that shit in the afterlife. That would be the worst trial ever.
My crippling fear is pretty simple. It's my own mortality.
Yeah.
I was reading an article earlier this week about how the U.S. life expectancy dipped again by another 11 months. And when I saw that the number was like under 80, and I realized that I'm 42, it's like, we're halfway through this movie, guys.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not ready yet. So what the fuck? I mean, it will keep me up at night, all night, just staring at the ceiling, thinking about my own death. And it fucking scares the shit out of me. How about you, Big D?
Oh, I second that 100%. It's because I'm not religious in the least. It's that thought of nothingness, of eternal darkness. You're gone. But the only thing that puts me at peace is that there are no options. It's going to come, and that we won't know that it has come.
I just want to point out that nothingness that you're unaware of is not nearly as bad as burning for all eternity because you had sex before you were married, like I was taught, which I don't believe anymore out there world. But, you know, I mean, that's where my abandonment complex comes from. And also I have this horrifying fear of being a terrible mother. I'm terrified that I'm going to fail my kids. You want to talk about staying up at night, Gene? Like, I will stay up at night and replay things that I have said to my kids. And I'm like, oh shit, they're going to have just terrible self-esteem because I told Finn that he needed to work on his timing in Super Mario Brothers because we kept dying at Bowser's Castle. Like, you know, like, I mean, seriously, like I will keep myself up, just torturing myself over the things I say to them.
But that's another flaw in the movie, Ash. Julia is supposedly a loving mother. She is super cool with being dead. Her only regret is that she embarrassed herself and died in the pool when she was a good swimmer. Where is she talking about missing her kid? She's like, they'll be okay.
They did sort of address that in the movie, where basically your brain undergoes a transition once you enter Judgment City, where it lets you release your life and you don't care about it. It's the same reason why Daniel's not like clawing to get back to Earth. It's like almost like they injected you with some sort of a drug that makes you not give a shit about anything you left behind.
Which is terrible. That's so awful.
Yes. And Ash, I also want to ask you one other question, something that struck me as a parent. How did they get that child to cry like that in that playpen? When Daniel is remembering his father about to beat his mother, that child was a genuine terror scream of like just death. How did they make that kid scream?
It was the 90s. They denied him food all day. There were no rules back then.
Also, forgive me, I'm not a parent, but if you just let a kid sit for 2 hours, won't they just do that anyway?
No, they'll get pissed off and be angry. That child was looking at something afraid, like they had a clown off stage, or they kept making loud banging noises.
There's two scenarios I could see. One that's terrible, which is it's Albert Brooks, but two that's amazing is it's Rip Torn. Just Rip Torn as Bob Diamond talking to a child. Hello!
That kid was afraid of something.
Well, when the movie announces that we're going to get that montage of Daniel's misjudgments in life, I think that verged the closest to what we were looking for here, right? It's him fucking up. It's him making bad decisions. I was hugely excited because I love blooper reels, and this one wasn't terrible. I think it was the only time I smiled at Albert Brooks, just watching him fuck things up over and over again, and I could have done with another minute or two of that. He nailed this segment.
Except for the fact that his wigs that they kept putting on him to try to make him look younger were just bigger and more curly. Like, what the fuck?
Dude, what's worse, a 24-year-old version of Albert Brooks or the young version of Billy Crystal in When Harry Met Sally? Both of them, they just tried to darken the hair. They're old men wearing these giant afro wigs.
Both are awful.
Yeah, the parallels don't stop there.
No.
They're just terrible.
Well, Daniel meets and falls in love with Julia, a recently deceased woman who lived a seemingly perfect life compared to his. Following each day's proceedings, Daniel and Julia spend time exploring Judgment City, including the Pavilion of Past Lives. In the meantime, things do not go well for Daniel. The prosecutor shows a series of episodes in which Daniel never managed to overcome his fears, while Bob Diamond vigorously attempts to portray Daniel's actions more positively.
The idea of past lives has always been really interesting to me. I think it's really fascinating. Big D, have you watched the documentary on Netflix about like all the ways that like we look at the afterlife and when people die? And one of the episodes is on people that believe they've had past lives. And there's some pretty freaky shit, like where these kids are able to tell adults like all about things that happened with their loved ones previously. Like it's interesting. So I do think it's cool, this idea of being on a loop. But then again, I get in my head and I worry about the relationships. Like, I just can't believe that the connections we make mean nothing. There is something in my children that's so inherently me, which I know is stupid because they have my genetics. I don't mean that. There's just something about them that, like, I've known them for forever. Like, they're my children. They've always been my children. I can't believe that connectiveness, if there are past lives, would mean nothing. So I'm okay with it if it means that we get to have a new life with the same souls, but like in different bodies, where like Finn is like a girl and I'm like the nice neighbor next door who babysits him. Like, that would be okay for me. And that's better than working for all eternity, as if that's our other option for an afterlife. But like, what about you guys? Like, do you buy the idea of past lives? Or like you said, Big D, is it all just nothingness after we go?
There's never a truly like cured alcoholic. You're always an alcoholic just dealing with it. Your religion is like that. When you've escaped the cult, you're still being polluted in your head. You're being tortured by the indoctrination that you had. Listen, I would love to think there is some big cosmic connection between us all that is stronger than our physical bodies. But here's the big problem. Everyone who comes out and says, I've had a past life, they're all someone important. I was Joan of Arc. I was Napoleon. Past lives are it's unbelievable.
Okay, for the sake of argument, let's say you've lived 1,000 past lives. One of them was probably important. Maybe you lived 100,000 past lives. One of them might have been important. Not everybody's Joan of Arc. Maybe you were just like a professional baseball player from the 1920s or something.
Or like the mayor of a small town. I'd believe that.
Or a podcaster. This could be his important life, Gene.
Yeah, so there's going to be other of my lives.
This is his loop.
Yes, I'm the high point in my loop. That's the pathetic thing. I'm the high point in my loop here.
I could just see a 4-year-old Big D in the next slide being like, I was a podcaster. And I was like, no fucking way. You weren't anybody important. Yeah, I did Shat the movies. No.
Then you get sent to timeout.
That's disgusting.
I'm shocked that you have a problem with the connections we make meaning nothing, because they do mean nothing. And I thought we were on the same page here.
Yeah.
We're just chemicals and electrical impulses that find things that please us during a painfully finite time on Earth. That's it.
Yeah, I'm with you. My nihilism is strong, my friend, but it ends with my kids. Like, that's the part of me that is just unable to admit this. Like, we find those things that we're attracted to that like make us better. Like, I do believe the people in your life that you choose to put in your life make you better because you choose to put them there. I just can't believe that my kids mean nothing. And I guess when they're older and they're teenagers and they're little shits, like, I will return fully 100% to nihilism and be like, fuck those bitches, right? But like, I'm 99.9% nihilist, but my children, man, they made me soft.
No, but listen, my view has gotten darker here when you said what I'm afraid of. It's the blackness of nothingness, but it's also the knowledge that everything we've done, everyone we've loved will be lost to history.
Well,
that within a couple years, it's like we didn't even exist. When I have my family, my father talk about his grandparents, it's gone. All the people, like in Westworld, you die when the last person who knew you is dead. That'll happen quickly enough, and our lives are meaningless.
Yeah.
That's why achievements are hilarious to me.
Yeah.
People are like, oh, I won this award, or I did this thing, or I'm going to be famous. Like, for how long?
Yeah.
For how long? Because in the end, we're going to be equals. I mean, unless you're like fucking Nero or something. We're going to be equals.
Which is not a great thing to be famous for, but I've never given two shits about any of that because we are all meaningless. Like, everything we do is meaningless. The job that I work is meaningless. The house that I bought, the way I've decorated it is meaningless. Like, when I die, when my children die, and maybe if I'm lucky after their children, if they decide to even fucking have them, which I hope they don't because of fucking global warming. But like, if they decide to have children, maybe they'll remember me, but then it's gone. And there's something comforting for me in that. What's the point?
The point's love, Ash. We're supposed to love each other. We're supposed to care. We're supposed to build bonds. Don't you know that?
We're supposed to build pods?
Yeah.
We're supposed to podcast. Then we should be doing House of the Dragon right now, people.
So earlier on, you mentioned that they do something that helps them forget. But we see here, as they're going through this process of ascension, they still have some normal earthly desires. And I found it questionable why Julia would fall in love with Daniel. It makes no sense in any earth, heaven, any transition point, other than maybe he was the youngest guy she could meet, and she was looking for like a last opportunity, a last minute, hookup. It makes no sense. He's not funny. His jokes aren't enjoyable. They have zero chemistry. Every interaction seems forced. And I don't get why they're so quickly to say I'm in love, let alone wanting to hang out with each other.
I felt terrible for Meryl Streep during this entire film. She really peaked around the time I was born. So we're talking about like 1980-ish. She had dramas like Sophie's Choice, which is fantastic, and Kramer versus Kramer. But she still had plenty of gas in the tank by 1991. Like, her decline wasn't severe. She was still a very respectable actress, perhaps, as many have said, like the greatest actress of her generation. But casting her in an Albert Brooks comedy, that's an unforgivable crime. It really hurts this movie. All she gets to do in this movie is to laugh loudly, stare at Albert Brooks. And I'm not saying Meryl Streep is incapable of playing this role. She's more than capable of playing the role. I'm saying the role of Julia is beneath Meryl Streep.
Look at what the Rotten Tomatoes score is of this, and you look at how Hollywood had perceived this film made about themselves. They thought it was funny. So she probably took the role thinking this is a big script. It's going around town. It's going to be a big hit film. But Al Brooks, he's not funny. His jokes are pathetic. And every time that the camera would pan to poor Meryl Streep, and I'm going to say Meryl Streep, not Julia, she looks like a hostage on set being forced to laugh. Like, ha, oh, you're so funny, Daniel. But the worst part and the biggest egregious sin, Gene, that I felt myself getting like violent is every time he would go in for that parsed lip attempt at a romantic kiss, you could feel every ounce of Meryl Streep's body repulsed and like trying to pull away from this kiss, but knowing she had to do it. It was painful to watch.
Yeah, I think the problem here is that Meryl is so incredible. And I disagree with you, Gene, about her peaking in the 80s. Like, I think some of her best work has been in the last decade. But regardless of when she's peaked or if she's not peaked, like, she's fucking incredible. And so when I see her on a movie poster, or when I see that she's in a movie, I assume the movie's going to be amazing because she's so good. And I was betrayed here. And I don't think it's because this is a comedy, because a lot of people think of her as a dramatic actress, but like, she's incredible in comedic roles. One of my favorite performances of all time, of like any movie of all time, is her performance 1 year after this in Death Becomes Her. She is so good in that movie, and she's done other comedies since then. I think the problem here is that this just isn't a good comedy.
Yeah, I stand corrected there. You're absolutely right, Ash. Death Becomes Her is fantastic, and she's really good in it. I didn't realize it was so close to this film in timing. Just a year later. Yeah, that shows it's not her. It's the movie.
And please, somebody commission that, because that is a movie I feel like we would have so much fun with on this podcast. It's a good one.
And we'll talk about death for like another half hour.
Yeah.
I'm struggling with a big question here. There's a scene where Daniel goes to get sushi, one of the few exciting things he eats during his time in Judgment City. And all the sushi chefs just keep yelling back whatever he says. I'm smiling. And then I wondered, is this scene racist? Because on one hand, it's stereotyping Asian people as being silly. But on the other hand, like, sushi chefs of all races act like this. And it's part of the reason, part of the charm of why I love going to sushi restaurants and sitting at the bar. I like to chat with the chef. They're always loud. They're always waving things around. They're just larger than life. Are they in this movie lampooning the race or the occupation? Like, is it okay to laugh at this? I'm torn.
Well, I felt this is like the restaurant's thing. It's like Benihana when they do the twirling with like the spatulas and the eggs, and they do the onion volcano and the white sauce. I think it's the thing. I don't think it's racist. Okay. And I didn't laugh at it, not because I thought it was racist. I just thought it wasn't funny. If the joke is well delivered, I'll take it. So my question was, we know they designed the city to make people in the West feel comfortable of their surroundings and to feel like at ease. With the lack of people of color, is there a different city that would make people feel more comfortable?
I don't know. I mean, maybe. I mean, the benefit of that is that Albert Brooks wouldn't be there. So it would probably make for a much better film. But to your point, Gene, I don't think this is racist at all. I just think it's not funny. I cringed the entire time. And it felt like one of those things that like gets out of control fast in the writing room where they're like, ha ha ha, so let's do it 5 times. I do like Benihana though, Big D. The onion volcano is amazing.
On the last day of Daniel's hearing, Foster plays footage of Daniel's previous night with Julia, in which he declines to spend the night with her. Foster believes this clearly underscores Daniel's fear and lack of courage. Bob Diamond counters that Daniel was afraid of contracting a disease. And Daniel clarifies that because when you sleep with someone, you are sleeping with everyone that person has ever slept with, he would be sleeping with some 25,000 or so people. The next day, it is ruled that Daniel will return to Earth, while Julia is judged worthy to move on. Defending your life is about life and death and fear and romance, but it made me feel something unexpected because it's a romantic comedy, but I wasn't really laughing. I wasn't sad. I wasn't even annoyed by this movie. As the movie went on and I saw Daniel interacting with all these characters in Judgment City, I was just deeply longing for the world of my childhood where nearly everything required a human interaction. It was a surprise side effect of watching this movie. Dining out, transportation, calling someone at a hotel, even buying a car. Like, there are so many people we don't meet anymore. So many pleasantries that aren't exchanged, whether it's at the grocery store where it's self-checkout or at the hotel where you just leave your card in the room and go. There's so much more choice for us now from the limitless options we have digitally. I'm starting to think that humans weren't built for the lives that we're living. And maybe socially and quality of life wise, we really peaked in the 90s.
So, Gene, I think now that you're in your 40s, I think you finally turned the corner like I have.
Oh, no.
There is some internal clock, I think. Because if you notice, a lot of people, when they get to the end of their life and their body has started to fail them, they're ready to go. They're like, shit, I've seen enough. At At my mid 40s and then like to now, and Gene, we're at the point now where we're pining for a simpler time. Can you imagine us if we make it another 30 years? We're going to be ready to go with just the annoying shit that we see that people are doing today. And God knows where we're going to be with social media. And this might be the point where we want to check out. Did you see the gift he got from his employees?
Yeah.
For a younger audience out there, when CDs first came out, to stop people from stealing them, they didn't have the technology of the sensors. They would have them in these giant long boxes. And I can remember Gene walking through the record store and flipping through these giant boxes of artwork, trying to find the next band that I was going to love. Yes, I'm ready to take the corner. Gene, let's go. Let's take the tram up. Let's get Judgment and let's just go on. I'm ready to check out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not as old as you two, but I understand some of what you're saying. Like, I miss having to like find things to do because I wasn't instantly entertained by devices. I miss having to ask someone for directions because we used to get into like really interesting conversations with people. And I had this thing with my kid the other day where I have Apple Music, like the family thing. And so he was playing around with my phone, listening to something, and it recommends that next song, right? Like it automatically just plays something. And so it played Fake Plastic Trees by Radiohead. And he came to me and he's like, I love this song. This is amazing. And I got really upset that that's how he was exposed to it because I have this distinct memory of sitting in a booth. Like, you remember the old booths where like you could sit on the floor and they had the big rectangle thing where you selected whatever CD you wanted to listen to. And I sat down and I had headphones on. I was 12 years old at Tower Records on Decatur Street, New Orleans. And I listened to the Bends for the first time. And I remember how emotional it was for me to hear that kind of music. It's an album that's still one of my favorites to this day. Sitting there listening to music that made me feel something I couldn't put into words at 12 years old, where I felt so alienated already, being surrounded by strangers and other booths having the same experience at the same time that were all unique to us. Like, fuck, man, the 90s were so much better than the 2020s.
Yeah, we get fooled into thinking we're interacting with more people, but it's not like a quality interaction. I was thinking about the other day, God, we sound like such old people. Right?
Yeah, we are.
We go on Facebook, and I've got like thousands of friends, right, on Facebook. And then how many of those people would I actually want in my home? It's like 10.
Or just think about catfishing. I watched the Manti Te'o documentary on Netflix, and like just the fact that catfishing can even be a thing now. Can you imagine the work? Like, you'd have to be a genius to be a catfisher in the 90s. Like, you would have had to work for it. I'd respect you. You don't have to do anything to catfish now.
Yeah, but I think the problem is how quickly you just lose interest and go to the next thing, Yeah, some people might say, Ash, the younger generation, your son might not have found that song unless it was for the recommendation. But the fact is, he's probably on to the next recommendation. Nothing will stick. Everything is fleeting. Everything is replaced. So nothing has any meaning.
Counterpoint is that we're living in an eternal present. Look at TikTok, right? Like, what's like the hottest song that's always reused? Rasputin. That song's been around for fucking, it's older than I am.
Is that the, oh no, oh no, oh no, 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 no.
No.
Which one is it?
No.
Sing it to me.
Jesus.
Say it to me. I don't have a I'm not on the TikTok. I don't have a TikTok account.
My nephew and you know, kids his age, they're listening to a lot of the same tracks we listen to because they don't need the physical media.
Yeah.
These old tracks are coming up and being, you know, recommended. So that part I think is kind of cool. But at the same time, I mean, the 90s, man, that's where it was. That's where it's at.
The show.
Well, Daniel boards a tram to Earth when Julia yells to him from a different tram. He claws open a door, dodges other trams, and suffers electric shocks to get to Julia's tram. He clings to the outside of the moving vehicle, banging on the door and trying to pry it open, and they tell each other they love each other. The scene pulls back to show that the entire event is being watched by closed-circuit TV by Diamond, Foster, and the judges. Diamond remarks to Foster, "Brave enough for you?" And she gives him a slight smiling acknowledgement. One judge whispers to the other, who then sends a message ordering the tram doors opened. Daniel and Julia are reunited and allowed to move on to the next phase of existence together.
So after doing this podcast for almost 300 movies, I find myself always looking for, okay, where is the reveal? What's going on? Where is going to be the twist? I kept thinking that you would not have Meryl Streep in this movie unless maybe she's God. Maybe she's the overall decision maker. Maybe she has a bigger purpose. Because the process, it all seems stacked against Daniel. He raises concerns. Bob Diamond is a hack. He disappears for a day. There's a lot of irregularities that he calls out. And I can't think that this system makes any kind of sense. Yes, it was the big brain people who are designing it, but was defending your life actually a legitimate process, or do they send everybody to Judgment City, present them with a final test where we see how they perform, and that's the determining factor? Because if it's the process, I think the movie sucks. But if there's some underlying context of this was a test for him to pass, I don't know what was going on.
No, I think you're giving it way too much credit. This is a romantic comedy and they end up together in like, you know, the 10% of brain power land. And for me, this again is Kafka. Like this has weird vibes like Kafka's novel, The Trial, which is about a guy who gets arrested for a crime that he doesn't know. It's a trial that he doesn't understand. And then a judgment is made. And now granted, Joseph K. and the trial is executed in the end. Daniel's not. But Daniel has these major decisions about his existence made by a group of people he's alienated from without ever understanding the process. It's Kafka.
The whole like bureaucracy component reminded me of Loki. It's sterile. It seems old. It seems stuffy. I think they should have been more imaginative. Have a more imaginative court method. Have a city layout that's better. Instead, we got people who are like eating 3-pound bowls of pasta and talking about bowling and playing golf. And they're taking Disney like the people movers all over the place. I like the way that Beetlejuice dealt with the afterlife in an original and entertaining manner. I wish they had done something more abstract in this.
Yeah, but man, that sand land that they like randomly sometimes get thrown to, like Beetlejuice had like hell aspects to it too, which I loved that aspect of Beetlejuice. But I am glad you mentioned Loki, because this movie gave me major Loki vibes throughout, because just like the show Loki, which is amazing and is so much better than this, you have a character that has to watch their life back, but Loki has these moral consequences to it. And I think that's what I miss through a lot of this movie, where like the consequences, the choices that had to be made in order to get to something better. And until the very end of this movie, there's no agency allowed to the people in this purgatory. Like they're able to choose like what they eat, they're able to choose what entertainment they have, but they have no agency over what happens to them. And I think that made this movie feel really super limited in so many ways, is that they're never making choices. Choices are being made like for them.
I had a hard time understanding why Bob Diamond was acting like Daniel's situation with Julia was something novel
exactly
in Judgment City, because I have a feeling that Daniel and Julia's experience isn't rare at all in Judgment City. They basically set up an Olympic village for the dead. I mean, if you think about it, most people arrive alone because we don't usually die in pairs with our loved ones. They get a free hotel stay, which everyone always fucks at hotels. They can eat all they want and not gain weight. They don't have to pay for any of it. They're only there for a few days, and then they either move on or get reincarnated on Earth. I'm surprised anyone even makes it to their court dates. You just have octogenarians banging it out left, right, and center.
Fuck yeah. Everything is consequence free. They make it like a parent. You can eat what you want. You can do what you want. There are no consequences. People would be raising hell. And what's the worst case? There's no hell. There's no purgatory. That might be LA. You go back around again. So you know there should be each round hundreds of people just going wild.
If anything, they're going to reward your ass and be like, Big D, you fucked her without fear.
Yes. Exactly. You didn't worry about your performance. That was brave of you. You're going.
You're Evel Knievel up in that shit.
Gross. Well, I think this end is obviously pretty predictable, but I don't know. I was fairly satisfied with it. I don't think they earned it, but I thought it was sweet. And I like the idea that he's going to be moving on with someone. It was cute. I was surprisingly okay, even though it was kind of lame. I think I'm just feeling sappy because my grandmother died.
But talk about Chekhov's electric tram field. The second Daniel gets on that tram, the PA system's like, you'll receive an electric shock if you try to depart the tram. I was like, oh, this motherfucker's going to be brave and try to get through the electric field at some point.
I don't know. The whole time I couldn't stop thinking about the backlot tour at Disney World at MGM. Like, that's exactly what it looked like. And they make the same announcements before that tour. So
again, it's just a Hollywood circle jerk.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now's the time we give the Shat score for Defending Your Life. The Shat score tells you how many wipes this movie takes out of your respective butts. 0 wipes is an all-you-can-eat restaurant with no calories or cost, or I guess sniffing coke off someone's dick. And 5 wipes is an absolute disaster of a movie. It is kissing Albert Brooks while stroking his wig in his tupa. I'll go first. I feel guilty doing this to Rip Torn because he is truly a delight in this film. This score has nothing to do with him. And there is some creativity to the design and the concept of Judgment City. I'll give them that. But a romantic comedy, which is what this movie aims to be, is supposed to make you laugh, and it's supposed to make you feel romantic. And Defending Your Life largely failed on both accounts. I'm sorry, Jody, but I'm going to have to go 4 wipes on this one.
I don't know. I don't think this is as awful as you do. I think part of that is that I didn't view it as a romantic comedy. I viewed this more as like a rumination on the afterlife. And so because of that, I didn't hate it. Yes, it was predictable. I didn't think it was funny, but it was allegorical. And I do love a good allegory. So overall, I do think it's worse than average, but I don't think it's like a crime of a film. So I'm going to go a little bit better. I'm going to say 3.5 wipes.
I'm going to say I think it was boring. I felt like it was sterile. It was unimaginative. I thought I could see them in Hollywood just jerking each other off under the table. Oh, this is going to be great. Oh yeah, this is going to be so great. And it was just sad. I felt bad. I was going to give it 4 wipes, but I have to add on a 0.25 for Crimes Against Meryl Streep. I felt for that woman. Just watch her dead eyes as he's going in for the kiss. That is worth half a wipe. This is pretty bad. I would not watch it again, and whew, it was wanting me to go to the afterlife.
Before I deliver the average wipe score, Jody, I just want to say thank you for the conversations we were able to have today.
Yes, it was good. It was fun.
Mm-hmm.
0 wipe podcast.
0 wipe podcast. There you go. So 4.25 wipes from Big D, 4 wipes from me, and a generous 3.5 wipes from Ash gives us an average wipe score of 3.91666 for Defending Your Life.
It's a weird score.
So, Gene, I'm excited to say with a score of 3.91, that now stands this movie alone in the 253 spot. It is better than Real Genius, Arachnophobia, Gleaming the Cube, and Inner Space, and it is slightly worse than A Christmas Story, GoldenEye, The Last Starfighter, and Lady Hawk.
I love Real Genius. I think that is a travesty of a score.
Maybe when our brains evolve, Jody, we'll understand this movie better, and because that feels like a harsh score. I'm sorry, man. But the heart wants what it wants.
And we appreciate you.
Hashtag Justice for Meryl.
Well, thank you, Jody, for this commission, and thank you for all your commissions over the years. We do have some commission requests coming in the mailbag this week, so let's get to those now.
So the first one comes from Jeremy, and I have to say, this email makes me so incredibly happy. It says, "Hello, I would like to commission a movie from you guys. It seems that you have never done it, nor is it scheduled. Seeing as how it has been referenced by Ash and Gene on the pod more than any other movie, I think it is time, I guess in a year or so, to review the Rocky Horror Picture Show. I know it is from 75, and you haven't done many 70s movies, but the precedent is there. Let me know if you all can do this, and I will send in the moolah. This could be our Halloween movie this year. Just throwing it out there."
Is it the Halloween? I've never seen it. Is it a Halloween movie?
I watch this every Halloween.
Yeah, it's definitely a Halloween movie. It's got like basically a haunted castle, a stormy night. You've got
aliens from outer space,
the undead. Yeah, aliens from outer space.
Killings with a chainsaw.
Yeah, I'd be okay. Okay, I'd be open to squeezing that in Halloween.
Musical numbers that are incredible.
Yeah, okay. I'm down for that.
All right, there you go, Jeremy. Send over the moolah.
Yay! And then the final email that we have tonight comes from Carlos and Natasha. And it says, "Good evening, Shat Crew. I stumbled upon your podcast several months ago and fell in love instantly. My wife, Natasha, and I recently went on a road trip, and listening to you guys was definitely a highlight of the trip. We got home and now are rocking Shat shirts. My birthday is coming up, and my wife asked me what I wanted. obviously I requested a commission. I completely understand you guys are booked a year out, but you guys are worth the wait. So with that said, my list of favorite movies or that have some kind of special meaning to me that you guys haven't done yet are Logan's Run, The Warriors, Easy Money, Legend, Return of the Living Dead. I would actually like you guys to decide on which one to do. I honestly can't decide. Early next year, I will be commissioning the month of Carlos the Mailman. Keep up the good work and know that you are much appreciated. Love, Carlos and Natasha.
So I had the pleasure of hanging out with Carlos and Natasha and Ash during our Rings of Power watch party this week. And they were super, super cool, great on Twitch. We got to hang out. And during that stream, we took a vote. And it seemed like overwhelmingly the audience was into us doing The Warriors from 1979, which I think, again, there is a precedent.
We've just ripped down that wall. There is no more precedent. We have Jaws coming up. There's a whole bunch of 70s. It seems like the wall's been kicked down.
I'm so bummed because Return of the Living Dead is so much fun.
I think The Warriors is more iconic.
Ash, weren't you cheering for the Warriors during the stream?
I mean, yeah, but then I was like thinking, and it's fine. I get Rocky Horror. It's okay.
There you go. But yeah, Carlos, thank you so much for your interaction with us. And Natasha, thanks for messaging us as well. It's been really cool getting to know you guys. And we would love to do The Warriors for you in September of 2023 for your birthday. And for you listeners out there, if you like to rock your Shat shirts of your own, you can always go to shatpod.com/shop. And we do have t-shirts, mugs, stickers, and all sorts of lanyap for you. You like that?
Mm-hmm.
Just check it out there, shatpod.com/shop. Big D, what do you have coming up next week?
Gene, next week, 6 criminals with pseudonyms and each stranger to each other are hired to carry out a robbery. The heist is ambushed by police, and the gang is forced to shoot their way out. At a warehouse rendezvous, the survivors realize that they were set up, trying to find the traitor in their midst. Commissioned again by Jody G., released in 1992. And this is a film that I think is long overdue.
I am so excited about this one. I think it is like finally time.
Jody, thank you so much for next week's commission, and thank you for this week's commission. Thank you to all our commissioners who make this podcast possible. That concludes this week's episode of Shat the Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat the Movies. You can email us, host@shatthemovies.com. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, just go to shatpod.com and use the SpeakPipe feature. We'd love to hear from you and hear your lovely voices. You can support the podcast by shopping our Amazon affiliate link, buying our merch, or commissioning your own movie. Find all that information by visiting our website, shatpod.com. Also, check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV. We review TV series such as Lovecraft Country, Westworld, True Detective, Taboo, American Gods, Watchmen, Game of Thrones, and not House of the Dragon, but it's really fucking good. You can find out all the information on our website, shatpod.com/TV, wherever fine podcasts can be found, including Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by Apple Podcasts, please be sure to leave a 5-star review. That helps the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-hosts, Ash, Big D, and the King Bee, I'm Gene Lyons. Join us next week for the following movie.
Face! Put the gun down!
Here are your names. Mr. White, Mr. Blonde, Mr. Pink.
Why am I Mr. Pink?
Who cares what your name is?
Yeah, that's easy for you to say. You're Mr. White. You have a cool-sounding name.
Let's go to work.
Well, I don't know why I came here tonight. I got the feeling that something ain't right.
What happens if the manager won't give you the diamonds?
Cut off one of his fingers. The little one.
I'm so scared in case I fall off the chair. And I'm wondering how I'll get down the stairs.
If they hadn't done what I told them not to do, they'd still be alive.
It's so hard to keep the smile from my face. I'm all over the place.
You're acting like a first-year thief. I'm acting like a professional.
And your family all but running. Slap you on the back and say,
Choice we've been doing 10 years. They can have some stupid motherfucker. Ain't no choice at all. Bam. Bam. Bam, 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 bam.
You're under arrest, sugar.
Harvey Keitel, Tim Roth, Chris Penn, Steve Buscemi, Lawrence Tierney, and Michael Madsen. They're the Reservoir Dogs.
Hey, Joe, want me to shoot this guy?
I FaceTime her. She doesn't FaceTime like on her own. the mother FaceTimes me, and then she uses my phone.
Why are you FaceTiming somebody's mom?
Because she's hot.
Oh.
Okay.
Put that in the pod.